Hello, we're back. It is the 4th of July. I'm not a fan. Been American my whole life, and I still don't like jets flying overhead and excessive amounts of fireworks that pollute the environment. So just being Debbie Downer over here, not excited to be in America today. And we're reading No Bad Parts, so my day is not entirely bad. My day's not bad at all, really. I am very privileged. I get to be safe and sound, and I'm just frustrated. So thanks for joining me. Have a giant glass of water. I almost filled it up so high that I had to bend down and sip it, or it would spill. Also, before we get started, I wanted to show you this plant. Look at this baby. Just growing everywhere. Oops, I just spilled water. Hold on. I have these awesome self-watering pots I got from Target for $5, and basically they have this catchment system in the bottom so that when you water the plant, the water stays in the bottom so that it could reabsorb the water when it needs to, but sometimes it just holds a lot of water and the water doesn't get reabsorbed and it just spills when I lift up my plants to show you how beautiful they are. So that's what happened. Okay, now we're ready. Do you feel ready? I'm ready. Also, you have a beautiful leaf in front of your view because I'm propagating plants. So I just gave all the plants a haircut, put them in some water, and then I'll have 8 new plants soon. Okay, we're reading, if I didn't get it all wet, we're reading No Bad Parts by Richard C. Schwartz, Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model. I really like reading this way because it helps me to stay accountable. First of all, I can't be on my phone because my phone is in use. Second of all, I love learning and I love this book, and so it's great motivation to get through it because it's easy for me to get distracted sometimes. And I like being able to share it, that I read a book and then I can just put it out there, and if other people have a hard time reading physical books like me, then you can listen to me read it to you, or maybe in the future I'll think this is very comforting to go back and hear myself read myself stories, who knows. But either way, I'm glad I'm here, I'm glad you're here. Let's see where we were. Yeah, we're on chapter 5, Mapping Our Inner Systems. Now that you have several practices under your belt and understand more about systems and the paradigm shift we're after here, I want to get into some of the ways parts organize themselves and relate with each other inside. I've already introduced the primary distinction between exiles and protectors. Let's look a little more into what those parts are like. Exiles. Let's start with the exiles. These are often the younger ones that have frequently been called inner children in our culture. Before we get hurt, they are the delightful, playful, creative, trusting, innocent, and open parts of us that we love to be close to. They are also the most sensitive parts, so when someone hurts, betrays, shames, or scares us, they are the parts who take it in the extreme beliefs and emotions or burdens from those events the most. After the trauma or attachment injury, the burdens these parts absorb shift them from their fun, playful states to chronically wounded inner children who are frozen in the past and have the ability to overwhelm us and pull us back into those dreadful scenes. They move from feeling I am loved to I am worthless and no one loves me. And when they blend with us, that belief becomes our paradigm and we feel all their burdened emotions. It feels unbearable to re-experience these emotions and to believe those things, and often those burdens impair our ability to function in the world. I've had clients who, when their exiles took over, couldn't get out of bed for a week. This is why we try our best to lock these parts away, thinking that we are simply moving on from bad memories, sensations, and emotions, not realizing that we are disconnecting from our most precious resources just because they got hurt. This is because we are imbued with the mono-mind paradigm that doesn't allow for the idea of hurt parts that can be healed, not to mention our American rugged individualism that says when you get hurt, the best course of action is to pick yourself up and move on. Indeed, it's likely that after you were hurt, the people around you gave you some version of that message, just get over it, for example, or stop being so sensitive. That's my least favorite. For these young parts, that's just adding insult to injury. The injury came from the event, and then you insult them by abandoning and imprisoning them. As a result, they are often quite desperate to be attended to and will try their best to break out of exile any chance they get. When we're tired, when we're not getting the accolades that keep them pacified, or when we're hurt or shamed in a way that's similar to the original event. This is such an unnecessary tragedy. These delightful inner children are hurt and then abandoned, and we no longer have access to their wonderful qualities. Instead, we assume that it's part of becoming an adult to no longer feel intense joy, awe, and love. Even when they're exiled, their burdens can exert an unconscious effect on our self-esteem, choice of intimate partner, career, and so on. They're behind the overreactions that seem mysterious to us and leave us perplexed as to why certain small things hit us so hard. It's very hard to grow up in the US without accumulating a number of exiles. As a child, you were almost certainly hurt, humiliated, or terrified multiple times by your family or peers, and were then coldly expected to just move on. Abuse survivors inevitably have many exiles. In addition to the vulnerable parts of us that get hurt and then exiled, there are other lively and protective parts that don't fit in our families, or maybe they scare people around us. Those become what I call protectors in exile. Robert Bly writes eloquently about these parts. Quote, a child running is a living globe of energy. We had a ball of energy, all right, but one day we noticed that our parents didn't like certain parts of that ball. They said things like, can't you be still? Or it isn't nice to try to kill your brother. Behind us, we have an invisible bag, and the part of us our parents don't like, to keep our parents' love, put in the bag. By the time we go to school, our bag is quite large. Then our teachers have their say. Good children don't get angry over such little things, so we take our anger and put it in the bag. By the time my brother and I were 12 in Madison, Minnesota, we were known as the nice Bly boys. Our bags were already a mile long. When we put a part of ourselves in the bag, it regresses. It devolves toward barbarism. Suppose a young man seals a bag at 20 and then waits 15 or 20 years before he opens it again. What will he find? Sadly, the sexuality, the wildness, the impulsiveness, the anger, the freedom he put in have all regressed. They are not only primitive in mood, they are hostile to the person who opens the bag. The man who opens his bag at 45 or the woman who opens her bag rightly feels fear. She glances up and sees the shadow of an ape passing along the alley wall. Anyone seeing that would be frightened. Every part of our personality that we do not love will become hostile to us. These exiles are what Freud famously called the id, and he mistakenly assumed that they were merely primitive impulses. I read that. As I discussed earlier, that negative take just added to Western culture's detrimental view of human nature and was highly influential in psychotherapy's disinterest in getting to know those parts of us. Once you have a lot of exiles, you feel far more delicate and the world seems more dangerous because there are so many things and people and situations that could trigger them. And when an exile gets triggered and bursts out of whatever container we keep it in, it can feel like we're about to die because it was exactly that scary or humiliating when the originating event happened. Or maybe, as Blind notes, we're terrified because the exiles have become so extreme. I'll write more on this topic later, but for now, I just want to note that in terms of spiritual preferences, our exile's sense of worthlessness is likely to unconsciously steer us towards spiritualities or gurus that promise redemption or salvation. Similarly, because of their fear and hurt, we might tend toward forms of worship that are centered around a guru or some notion of an all-powerful God. Managers. When you have a lot of exiles, other parts of you will have to leave their valuable roles to become protectors. It's like your adolescent parts are pressed into military or police service. Some of them take on the role of controlling the outside world so that nothing triggering happens. They manage our relationships, appearance, and performance, often by yelling at us the way our parents or teachers once did, so that we'll try harder or look better. These are the parts that become inner critics. Other parts take another approach and try to take care of everyone else while neglecting ourselves. Others are hypervigilant and some are intellectual and are skilled at keeping us out of our bodies. There are many common roles these manager parts take. What they all have in common is the desire to preempt the triggering of our exiles by controlling, pleasing, or disconnecting us. So managers are one class of protectors. These parts carry heavy burdens of responsibility for which they are ill-equipped because they are young too. In family therapy, we call children who take on these adult duties parentified children. Managers are parentified inner children. They're usually very tired and stressed out. They're trying to keep the world safe for our exiles while at the same time keeping our exiles contained. They also have the ability to numb our bodies so we don't feel so much, because if you don't feel, then you don't get triggered. Managers are working all the time. Some of them never sleep. Other managers don't want us to feel good about ourselves for fear that we'll take risks and get hurt. They protect us by tearing us apart. They are the self-hating parts of us who will sabotage anything that might make us feel good. They may let us try meditation or other spiritual practices, but usually just to reduce stress rather than to commune with the non-dual. If the practice helps them contain the exiles, as in a managerial spiritual bypass, they're all for it. Mainly, they want to keep us small because the safest place to be is below the radar. In general, managers don't like anything that takes us out of their control, and as I mentioned above, don't like anything that makes us open our hearts and feel confident or good about ourselves. On the other hand, there are managers who want to belong and to please everyone. These are the parts that make us go regularly to church, for example, but they're not all that interested in directly experiencing the divine. Firefighters. Firefighters are another class of protectors entirely. Despite how hard our managers work to prevent it, the world has a way of triggering our exiles at times, of breaking through what psychotherapy traditionally calls our defenses. When that happens, it's a big emergency. To many of your protectors, experiencing the pain of your exiles feels like you might die. Consequently, most of us have a set of parts whose job it is to deal with these emergencies, parts who will immediately go into action to put out that inner fire, the flames of emotion bursting out from the exiled place. In contrast to the managers who try to preempt anything that's going to trigger the exiles, these firefighter parts are activated after an exile has been triggered and desperately, and often impulsively, try to douse the flames of emotion, get us higher than the flames with some substance, or find a way to distract us until the fire burns itself out. Depending on how much you fear your exiles, your firefighters will resort to desperate measures with little regard for the collateral damage of your health or your relationships. All they know is they have to get you away from those feelings right now or else. Sometimes their fears of your death are warranted because suicide is an option for some firefighters if other solutions don't work. I refer to spiritual bypassing in Chapter 1. Many people come to meditation to escape their feelings, and I find the use of spiritual practices to transcend one's exiles to be rampant in the communities I treat. Your firefighters will get you addicted to the practice, in part because it's a great solution for them. You feel good as long as you do it, and unlike other addictions on the menu, no one is upset with you for doing it, including your own managers. In fact, people admire or envy your discipline and see you as holy. Unlike managers, firefighters love going into the higher realms and losing control. The further from your pain, the better. In those higher realms, you can access a lot of pure self, which feels great even though it doesn't heal anything and can make exiles feel even more abandoned. Where exiles are often desperate for redemption, firefighters are like babysitters for those younger parts. Babysitters who can't get the kids to stop screaming or giving your system waves of anxiety or shame. For this reason, firefighters are desperate to find someone to make the exiles feel better, and often become recruiters who search for that special person or practice. They turn us into seekers who move from one meditation or spiritual leader to another, looking for the one that can permanently make those exiles feel better. Or, if they find one that seems to do the trick, they become zealous advocates and followers. Many people come to spiritual traditions with lots of exiles because of the intense trauma in their backgrounds, hoping for relief. Unfortunately, many spiritualities don't know what to do with people's traumas other than to help them bypass them. One last thing about firefighters. For us to live in this culture and not see the suffering of its exiles or feel the outrage of what we are doing to the earth, we need distractions. We are provided with a plethora of firefighter activities to help us numb the pain of this moral injury. Remember, self sees, feels, and acts to change injustice, so to not do any of that, we need illegal drugs or prescription medications, constantly available media entertainment, all-consuming jobs, and spiritual bypasses. I'm not trying to hold myself up as a model of self-leadership in this regard. I spend more time watching Netflix and the Boston Celtics than protesting in the streets. I comfort myself that promulgating IFS is doing something important, but I still need my firefighters to keep me from fully absorbing what's happening in the world and devoting all my time and energy to activism. I want to reiterate here that these categories, exiles, managers, and firefighters, do not describe the essence of your parts. They're simply the roles these parts were forced into by what happened to you. Returning to the systems idea of reinforcing and stabilizing feedback and homeostasis, managers are commonly your system's homeostatic mechanisms. Whenever your behavior or inner experience strays away from what they believe is safe for you, they act to bring you back. For example, if many of your parts carry the burden that the world is very dangerous and it's best to stay invisible, when you start to feel good about yourself, your critic will tear you down out of fear that you'll start taking risks. If the critic gets overridden, then other managers kick in. Maybe you dissociate or fall asleep. Many would-be meditators who feel like failures because they struggle with the practice turn out to be carrying that burden. Parts won't let them meditate because they don't think opening the heart is a good idea. In this example, the variable your managers are containing within a homeostatic range is your self-worth. In other people, it might be anger, sadness, exuberance, or neediness. In still others, it's behaviors like spontaneous movement or speech, assertiveness, or vulnerability. We all have burdens that are committed to keeping us safe and homeostatic. They differ in the kinds of stabilizing feedback activities they use, but not in their intentions. In some ways, firefighters generally seem to be part of reinforcing feedback loops because their activities often take you far out of your manager's comfortable homeostatic range. Then those managers will do their best to bring you back. Indeed, the reinforcing loop is often between firefighters and managers. The harder managers try to control them, the stronger firefighters become, which can escalate to your death in some cases. Yet firefighter behavior itself is usually homeostatic in the sense that its original purpose was to squelch or distract from the exiled feelings until they are back within a tolerable range. The triggering of exiles often kicks off reinforcing feedback cycles because attempts to stifle them from either managers or firefighters will make them try harder to break out or get your attention. What begins as a slight headache becomes a raging migraine, for example, when your managers convince you to ignore the exile's first attempt to get your attention. The point here is that thinking systemically and tracking inner sequences of parts activities that surround problems allows you to avoid the mistake of, for example, colluding with your managers to further repress your firefighters or exiles, taking an aspirin instead of listening inside to your exile's pain. Or you and your therapist won't overreact if, after you do listen and feel the exiled pain, the next day you feel suicidal or want to go get drunk. Instead, you and your therapist trust that the exile work must have triggered a firefighter you didn't get permission from, who is now afraid and is simply acting in a homeostatic way. Again, traumatized inner systems are delicate ecologies. Just like with external ecologies, changes in one aspect can have unforeseen consequences. This is far less likely, however, if you think in terms of systems. Then the consequences often can be foreseen and preempted or dealt with from self. Of course, this map doesn't just apply to inner systems. It has been used effectively to understand the work with families and corporations, and I believe it applies to human systems at any level. Systems of parts and people tend to polarize from protective alliances and exclude or cut off from each other whenever they are traumatized and lack effective leadership. The exercises in this book are mainly focused on helping you get to know and appreciate your protectors. It can be quite a bit trickier to open up to your exiles by yourself. If you do begin to feel overwhelmed with exiled feeling, it's important to shift out of the exercise. In most cases, it works to get to know who some of your exiles are, but we're not inviting you to actually get close to them and try to help them, because most people, including myself, need to have somebody with them to do that. Ideally, an IFS therapist. See the directory on ifs-institute.com. Or at least somebody who can stay in self while you get emotional. I learned many years the importance of respecting protectors and their right to protect the system and to not be pushed out of the way. Burdened inner systems are sensitive environments, and we need to approach and visit them accordingly. Your protectors have spent a lifetime trying to keep you and everyone else away from your exiles, so they need to be consulted first and convinced that there is a good reason to let you go there. We don't go to exiles without permission from protectors. I learned this the hard way in the early days of developing IFS. As clients describe having parts that were in intense pain or terror, it seemed like those were the ones that needed to heal, so I steered my clients toward them as soon as I could, and when we succeeded in getting there, we were unknowingly bypassing their protectors. As we'll see with Mona soon, some clients experience severe backlash reactions, suicidal impulses, physical pain or fevers, episodes of self-hate or distrust of me. As the protectors punish them for our transgression, this is why we've learned to be ecologically sensitive guests in our clients' ecosystems. That's partly why I'm laying this map out now, so that as you continue with the exercises, you can keep in mind where we are and where we're headed. Again, it's a fairly simple map: exiles, managers, firefighters. The only other category you might find yourself are the protectors in exile I briefly mentioned. These are parts that are not young and vulnerable. Instead, they are often impulsive firefighters like your managers locked up because they hurt someone or have that potential, or because you were raised with parents or in a culture. My video got cut off. I'll reread that last sentence for you. Let's see. Or because you were raised with parents or in a culture that shamed you for having these parts. Often you will be very frightened of and have distorted views of these parts until you begin to listen to them and find that they are no different from other protectors. They need your help too. Once again, I want to remind you that the categories I described in this map don't capture the essence of your parts themselves. Instead, they are just the roles your parts were thrust into because of what happened in your childhood. They are maintained by the burdens they carry and by where they are frozen in the past. When retrieved, unburdened, and released from their roles, these parts become something quite different and always valuable. It's often hard to predict what they'll transform into. A manager might just want to lay on the beach, and a firefighter might want to use its energy for something healthy and playful rather than on getting you drunk. Session 2, Mona. I was recently asked to offer a consult session for an IFS therapist whose client, Mona, had a psychotic break 4 years earlier and was interested in exploring the parts that might have been involved with that, but she was also quite afraid too. Mona told me that during that prior episode, she'd been hospitalized and put on antipsychotics and diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. She had rebuilt her life since then, but she was still medicating for fear of a relapse and wanted to see if IFS could help her understand what happened and gain confidence that it wouldn't come back. With her therapist, Bob, with her on the Zoom call, I asked Mona to focus on the manic part and find it in her body. She locates it in her chest and sees an image of herself in the psych ward, feeling trapped and desperate. I ask how she feels toward that younger woman, and she says she feels sorry for her and wants to hold her there. I tell her to do that, and she does, but suddenly she shifts away from the scene and says she's sleepy. I ask to talk directly to the part that's taking her away with sleep and ask it why it is afraid to let her stay with that part in the hospital. It says it's afraid that manic part will take over again and she'll wind up back where she was. I tell it that makes sense, but that I know how to keep it from taking over and instead will help it not have to be in this manic role. The sleepy dissociative part recedes and Mona returns to holding the woman in the hospital. Suddenly she sees a giant abyss and is afraid of it. I ask her to get the scared parts into a waiting room and assure her that her therapist and I will be with her if she wants to go into that black hole. She now feels curious and wants to enter with us. We enter and she sees a hand reaching out from the dark. She takes the hand and we leave the hole and find that the hand is attached to a 4-year-old girl. Mona embraces the girl and spontaneously apologizes to her for throwing her in the hole. I tell her to ask the girl what happened to her in the past. A protector jumps in to say that it was the girl's fault. I talk directly to the protector and ask where it got that idea. It says that her parents always stressed how she and her sisters were responsible for what they allowed boys to do to them. I tell the part that it's understandable that it would believe what the parents said and would want to protect them, but that we need to help the 4-year-old unload all her feelings and we won't automatically believe what she shows about what happened. We'll just heal her. Mona suddenly sees the girl naked and outside, and she isn't sure how she got there. I tell her to ask the girl. There was a teenager who came to live with my family. She says he did something to her, but she doesn't know what because she left. She dissociated. She went to sleep. I say, yeah, that same sleepy dissociating part protected her the way it's been trying to do today. We need to remember to thank it for saving you. I tell Mona to enter the scene and be with the girl in the way she needed at the time. She does and gets the girl in some clothes and brings her out of the scene to the present and helps her unburden the shame and terror she's been carrying since that time. The girl feels very happy now and wants to play. I tell Mona to bring in the manic woman in the hospital to see that the girl is doing well, and the woman takes off her hospital gown and unburdens the manic feelings. Mona says, I think when I was experiencing psychosis, parts of my brain were grasping some of this, but it was too much. We end the session with homework that Mona is to make a daily practice of checking on these parts every day for at least a month. She says she feels lighter and relieved. However, several hours later, I get a panicky call from her therapist saying that Mona is suicidal. He asked me to talk to her again. Okay. Again, I'm going to do Dick, Mona. Okay? This is a dialogue. Okay, sorry, there are 3 parts at one point. Dick, what's happening? Mona, I was driving home and felt intensely suicidal. There's a part that's furious with me and wants to kill me. All right, let's work with it. Let me talk to it so we can see what it wants us to know. Are you there? Excuse the language. Mona's a stupid fucking bitch. I hate her so much. I hate her so much. I just want her to die. I want to hurt her and hit her. Calmly. Why? Tell me why. She does everything wrong. What are you afraid would happen if you didn't kill her or hurt her? She just keeps fucking everything up. What did she fuck up? Crying. She can't get us the kind of love that we need because she messes everything up, every relationship. All right, but tell me why you're so upset with her now. Is it related to the work we did? She's making everyone see that she's exposed and naked. So what was that like for you to have her expose that? It's the worst thing that could ever happen. She needs to be strong and perfect. How old do you think she is? As Mona. She says I'm 32. I'm telling her I'm a lot older than that now. Great. I suspect that when you were 32, she had good reasons to keep you strong and perfect. Is that right? And to attack you if you ever did let your guard down? Yeah. I got depressed then, and I totally shut down and lost everything, and it went on for years. Is she relieved to learn that you're not in that place now? No, because she says I'll probably just keep fucking up and getting hurt. Okay, let me talk directly to that part again, to the part. How has it been to talk to me about these feelings you have? It's good to tell someone how stupid she is. No. What you've told me is how dangerous it is for her to expose herself and be vulnerable, and we get that. And we get that there were times when you really needed to keep her from doing that. How does it feel to hear that? It feels good. Thank you for sharing all that with me, and let me talk to Mona again. Are you there? She nods. How do you feel toward this part now? I feel affection for it. It's just trying to keep me in line. Yeah, it's just trying to keep you safe. It doesn't really want to kill you. It doesn't know what else to do but threaten you to get you to behave. Let it know you get that and see how it reacts now. It's feeling relief. And do update it about your life now and how there are people you can trust to be vulnerable with, like Bob, her therapist. Yeah, she's crying and exhausted. I'm asking her where she got these beliefs about having to be perfect and strong. She says it was in my 20s. I'm holding her while she cries. She feels embarrassed for her outburst. No need to. It's great you found her too. And I'm glad you guys called me, and I'll hand it back to Bob now. Bob. Thanks, Dick. Mona, how do you feel toward that part now? Very maternal. I'm still holding her. The reason I include this session is probably clear. No matter how much we check with protectors up front and seem to get permission from them, it's uncommon for firefighters like Mona's to backlash. It's not uncommon for firefighters like Mona's to backlash afterward. If something like this happens with you, instead of polarizing the part and initiating a reinforcing feedback loop, try getting curious instead. In my experience, the part just needed to be understood, reassured, and loved. As we approach their exiles, I've had many clients say, with anger or shame, some version of the following to me. I don't know what you're doing to me. I've been sober for 10 years and I went out and got drunk last night. My standard reply is, that's great, because now we have a direct line to a part we haven't healed yet. Needless to say, the perspective that symptoms are the activities of parts has been a tough sell in the psychotherapy field. With Mona, we met what I suspect were 3 firefighters: the sleepy dissociating one, the manic one, and the suicidal one. We also encountered one manager, the one who blamed her for what happened. How can you tell the difference? It's not about the protective activity, because virtually any activity can be used by both. For example, let's say I have a client who's a binge drinker. If he ever feels slighted, he goes to a bar and gets drunk. But over time, he finds that if he stays drunk all the time, he never feels the slights in the first place. Thus, drinking has shifted from being a firefighter activity to a manager activity. The same activity is being used by different parts for different purposes. Managers preempt the triggering of exiles, and firefighters react after an exile has been triggered. Mona's example also brings up the issue of recovered memories. Mona saw herself as a naked child who is saying that the teen did something to her. Is that an accurate memory? We can't know for sure without further evidence. With IFS, however, we can retrieve and unburden that child without having to know if the memory is accurate or acting on it in the outside world, and that will still have a healing impact. That was kind of heavy, huh? We're on part 2. We're halfway. I love this book, love the storytelling, and I'm excited to keep going. It looks like there are quite a few exercises and conversations still, so there we go. We're on page 89 now, chapter 6, and I will talk to you again shortly. Have a good day. Bye.